I think two things that we're starting to do differently or excited about doing differently from a recruiting standpoint. One is, you talk about having you got to have a strong Rolodex, right, of consultants. So we've made some investments there to be able to have some, let's just call it a contact management database, where we are putting all the people that we get in touch with and put them into a system that allows us to stay in touch with them, that allows us to search and see who's there, to keep some detailed information about, we know you're a friend of ours, we know that you're on an assignment out in Iraq and it ends in, a year from now, so you're probably not interested or marketable at this point, but we have that detail about you and we know when you maybe become available, so it's that kind of contact management information system that I think is going to revolutionize some of the recruiting. I think Devex does a lot of that with your own database, but it's your data, right? So we get people coming in from all different sources, so it's taking that type of approach and moving it forward. It also gives us an opportunity to build campaigns, which is interesting. So we could do a search, find somebody who has chief of party experience, they speak French, and they also have experience in West Africa, right? Figure out who those 50 people are in our database, and then send them a blast saying, hey, we're interested in talking to you. So it's campaigning as well as contact management. So that's exciting for us. I think the other piece I would mention is, trying to figure out how some of these localization issues that Devex has talked about with this group, USAID Forward and things like that, how we can evolve and continue to be competitive in that space, knowing that these trends and pressures are on us, and what that means in terms of our operating infrastructure, how we classify staff, how we package, benefits and allowances for staff. How do we remain competitive among our competitors in terms of, attracting and retaining? How do we look at our key national staff that are in countries that we're trying to capture, and focus on, developing those relationships. So as localization and USAID Forward evolve more, it's putting more pressure on us to kind of move from that expatriate model to hybrids of international assignments, but also some more focus as it relates to key staff in the host countries. So, which is also a great thing because it's pushing development, and it's also proving that if you find that talent, that development is working. So it's also reinforcing in that way. Some solutions that are coming out of this localization trend, well, one is, it's a trial and error approach to a certain extent, but it's also, making sure that what we're learning is that as long as however you structure things, you have to communicate kind of what you're doing and why you're doing to your community. So your client and also the people that you're recruiting, so they can understand, because it's a different approach, it's a different model. So some transparency and some discussion around kind of what we're doing. I'll give you an example. So moving away from traditional expatriate models to what we would call a regional third country national. So hiring a Tanzanian to go into Kenya, right? Perhaps it has a different approach in terms of how we classify them and how we support them with certain benefits and allowances, which have to be competitive, but we also have to explain kind of that policy and that context to our clients so they can understand it better, but also be familiar with it, so when they see it on the next bid, they're not asking the same questions in BAFO and things like that. So as we're playing with our models to adapt, we also have to be very communicative and make sure that we're sharing information and approaches and getting feedback and learning from it, not only from the client, who will definitely ask questions, but also from the candidates who want to understand, well, why isn't this like X, which it was like before? Well, because the landscape's changing, and working with them on that. So becoming flexible and transparent and communicative, I think, is helping us kind of ease through some of these localization pressures.
And so is USAID sort of starting to get on board with this idea of having not just those two categorizations, but sort of having it all converge somewhere?
Right. I think I think USAID is responding fairly well. I think they're seeing the need. They have a classification, I believe, called a resident hire. Somebody within for national in country, and that they wouldn't assume has a fully loaded expatriate package, right? So I think that they understand that. I think they see the competitiveness of it. It has to be coupled with qualified for the job, and how well they're known, and the proven success and so forth. So we haven't had a lot of pushback from them when we look at proposing these hybrid models. Where we are getting pushback is how many expats you can have on a project. And I think something that might also be interesting to note is that the host country governments are also getting wise to the ways of expatriate types of practices, meaning we're starting to see more pressure around proper immigration compliance. We're seeing pressures around taxation at the local level, duties and so forth as it relates to relocation and repatriation and so forth. Now, it's not happening across the board, but there are pockets where things are getting more challenging. So I think localization is going to trend more in some of these emerging markets, and you're going to see it in more ways than just recruiting. You're going to see it in terms of how you actually operate in country as well.